What's going on, everyone? So I'm back with the Samurai Jack review, and tonight was episode number 5 of the new 5th season. So this was an incredible episode, and I'm going to get into everything that happened and make sure I cover everything because there's a lot to go over this episode. Okay, so we see this army arrive on Aku's castle, or Aku's little hideaway, and we find out that this little army actually belongs to that of the Scotsman. We finally see the Scotsman back yet again, and we get a hilarious scene of one of his daughters coming up in a little bit of a skimpy Scottish outfit. And he goes all dad on her and is like, "Why are you wearing this? You're at a war right now. You're going to war. You're not going out on a date, or you're not going out," as he said, "You're not going out dancing." So he makes her cover up, and then he looks at all of these other girls. There looks like 20 or 30 of them, and he says, "You guys too." So I just assumed that they were her friends or something, but they all say, "Yes, Dad." So that means they're all his daughters. Holy shit, I thought freaking that one lady giving birth to all 7 twins at the same time was intense, but all of these girls look around the same age, and they're all his daughters, and there's like 15, 20 of them. So yeah, I guess the Scotsman got busy in those 50 years. Anyway, Scotsman is charging towards, with his army, Aku's evil lair. And this is actually really interesting because we've never seen the Scotsman and Aku, correct me if I'm wrong, on screen together at the same time. Aku has never fought the Scotsman. The Scotsman has never had the chance to fight Aku, which I've always wondered. I've always thought that this would be a really good fight because the Scotsman also has, just like Jack, a magic sword. So they're firing all of these missiles and stuff at Aku's tower, and Aku is inside of his tower, and he's just like, what's going on? What's all this racket? And he unzips his wall and sees the people shooting at him. And we get to hear more of Greg Baldwin as of Aku. And, at first I used to think his voice was pretty good, but the more and more I'm hearing it, the more and more I'm just like, what is he doing with this voice? There's like 20% of the time I hear his voice, I hear a good voice. I hear a good voice that sounds ancient Japanese, and it sounds great. But there's so many times this episode where he sounds so thick Hispanic. Like, I'm just sitting here like, what are you doing with this voice? And there's some lines, I don't remember what they were exactly, but there were some lines I was listening to this that were so poorly delivered that it almost sounded like he was trying so hard to get the voice right that the delivery of the line, was faltered, because he was trying so hard to at least try to get the voices right as possible that the delivery of the line sounded like shit. He sounds good in some places, but in other places it just doesn't sound that good, which is a bit disappointing for me, because when we heard him the first time, I actually liked it a lot. I actually thought his voice was pretty good. Who knows? Maybe it'll go back and forth with me. Probably next time I hear his voice, I'll be like, "Oh, well, that sounded great." But I heard it this time, and I'm just like, that didn't sound as good as it did the first time. But whatever. So Aku is ready to attack, and he jumps up in this giant ball. What I think is hilarious is that Scotsman now is in a wheelchair. Like before, he was just walking around, but I guess all that fat and oldness got to him, so now he's in a wheelchair being wheeled by his daughter. But anyways, Aku leaps out of his tower, and it is in this giant ball, and literally crushes his entire army in like 10 seconds. And the Scotsman says, he literally says, "Well, this was a bad idea. All right, girls, run for the hills. We'll do this another day." And it only took like 15 seconds for this to happen. But as they're running away, the Scotsman stands his ground and says, "I'll hold him off," as they're all running away. And Scotsman is doing what he does best and just starts shit talking Aku, just being like, "You're a little crybaby," or whatever. You know what he normally does. And it's hilarious because Aku's just sitting there taking it, and then he just laser beams him, and holy shit, the Scotsman is dead. He killed the Scotsman because the smoke clears, and it's just a skeleton in the wheelchair. Holy shit. We finally got to see the Scotsman, and what happens the very first episode? In the first 5 minutes of his appearance, he dies. But what I also thought was impressive is that his sword cracked. His magic sword cracked and broke. That's like Thor's Mjolnir breaking. That's very hard to have happen. It's something that has magical properties. But anyway, his daughters lift up the sword and they look at his ashes. But from his ashes comes his spirit. And they're like, "Oh, Dad, you're alive. How is this possible?" But he says it's possible because of the magic from my sword. And they say, "Oh, awesome, Dad. Well, okay, what do we do now?" Well, he says, "All right, well, let's meet up with the samurai, and then we'll, basically make a plan from there." So we go over to Jack and what is her name? I think her name is Ashi or something like that. One of the daughters of Aku. And they're literally exactly where they were last time. They were just sitting on that grass pile. But she gets a vision from her mother, the one that gave birth to her. Just basically checking up on her. Like, what are you doing? Why didn't you kill the samurai? He's just laying right next to you. Just go ahead and kill him. And she says, "No, I want answers. I want to know what's going on. He told me that Aku is evil and that he is the good one." And then she starts calling her a traitor. How could you have failed us? You failed us. And she just responds just by saying, "Look, all I want is answers." And then she refuses to answer, and she just says, "You failed us. You're weak. You're nothing. Goodbye," and just leaves. Well, finally it's daytime, and she wakes up to see Jack jumping inside of the river and doing a Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think it was like episode 2 or something, when Aang was riding that sea creature. It's just basically the same thing. Jack jumps in the river and finds this sea creature, and it starts riding it and is controlling it. And he brings it down to her and just says, "Get on." So they're traveling across the water, and she's getting to see all of these living sea creatures just jump around and just do nature stuff. And she's smiling and stuff because she's been locked up this whole time. She's never really gotten to see these kinds of things. So they land, and Jack thanks the sea dragon or the sea creature, and then he brings her up on land, and then he walks away and he says, "All right, goodbye." He doesn't even say, "This is where our paths end." He just says goodbye. So he walks, and now it's nighttime again already, and Jack is by a fire, and Aishi actually followed him. And she's like, "No, I need answers. I need you to tell me now. You said Aku was evil. You said you were good. Well, you need to show me." And he says, "No, I won't show you." And she says, "Well, how can you say this? How am I supposed to believe you? How can you say all of this, but then you refuse to tell me?" And then she starts calling him all these names, and he says, "Okay, you know what? Fine. I will show you." And she says, "Okay, fine. Show me." And he says, "I will in the morning." And she says, "Ugh." So she gets up and she passes out and goes to sleep. Before she goes to sleep, she actually asks him, "Hey, who created the stars? Is it Aku? I was told Aku created the stars." And I love Jack's response, because she said, "Did Aku create the stars?" And he literally goes, "No." That's literally his answer. He's so dumbfounded as to how someone could possibly think that Aku created the stars. He literally was just like, "No." But yeah, so she's smiling at this story that he's telling her. He basically tells a story about how 2 little kids, did some bullshit where they threw an arrow into the sky and it created the stars or something like that. Some old Japanese folktale, and she falls asleep. Well, they wake up, and he's off to show her everything that's gonna show her the truth. And so he takes her to Aku's this city, which is what he refers to as the main city of Aku. He ends up stealing this wardrobe for him to be able to disguise himself, and he sees all of these creatures of Aku that are doing all of this evil, and he's just showing her like, hey, look at this. This is what Aku has done, and she sees all of this, fire everywhere on these trees and in this city, and these people that are damaged, and he finally says, do you believe me now? And she finally says, yes, I believe you. So we finally have her on Jack's side. She finally has turned. So this is great. We were wondering at the end of last week whether or not she actually would, but we do now know she is definitely turning. We get to see this little blue creature that still reminds me of freaking Beast Boy, and it's a whole bunch of them, and he's wounded, but he says, oh, thank God, Samurai Jack, you're here. I knew you would come back. But they're going to find the source of what's been going on, so they go to this little, lab thing where a whole bunch of these different creatures are being kept, the same blue Beast Boy looking creatures, and there's a whole bunch of them, but apparently they're all being controlled by some radio frequency that's turning them into just basically raw instinct animals, and they literally just start trying to go and attack both of them. Well, they're both running, and Jack flings her up on top of the roof, and it's just basically like, hey, find whatever is making them do all this rampantness and turn it off, while Jack ends up facing up all against those animals by himself. So he's running and he's running, and then she's running to try and figure out what's going on. She ends up coming across this big hulking robot guy who ends up holding her captive and is torturing her. Like, he literally starts making himself electrocute his hands and just starts electrocuting her. Meanwhile, Jack is getting the crap beaten out of him by these creatures that will not let him go. No matter how no matter how he tries to separate himself from them, they literally just pull him back in and keep scratching at him. He tries to hide in this building, but there's a really funny scene. It's not, well, I guess it's kind of intimidating, but to me, when I saw it, I thought it was funny. One of the creatures he's just sitting there hiding, hoping they won't see him, and then one of the creatures just slowly opens the door, and it's just one of them. It just looked funny to me. But there's another weird scene where he jumps out the window, and then the creatures jump out the window with him and then pull him back into the building, back through the window. But we flash back over to Ashi, who's literally being tortured, but the robot guy walks away and he says, I need to recharge myself. So he literally pulls out a wall charger from his butt and connects it into the wall and just starts charging himself back up. Man, I wish fast chargers charged my phone up or something this fast. It literally charges him up in like 5 seconds, back up to max. He goes over and looks at the cameras and is looking at her all tied up and is looking at Jack being attacked by those creatures. And it's just basically like, oh, this is incredible. Aku's, thing is coming to fruition. And then he goes over to her and says, I can't believe they trained those little kids into believing all of this and to doing whatever they tell them to do. They're just such saps. Kids are such, little wimps, and, they're so easy to control, which is what she was. And so he starts electrocuting her again. But we see a really fucking badass scene of her where she literally starts to fight against the electricity and literally frees herself from this little cell that she's been caught in. And he starts electrocuting her even more. But she literally fights through the electricity, jumps forward, and just starts beating the shit out of this guy. And it's actually a guy. Like, it's not a robot. It's a guy in a robotic suit. Which is an interesting change of pace, because had this been old Samurai Jack, that wouldn't have been a guy in a robot suit. That would have just been a robot with, who would have probably been sliced and diced. But we see here is where shit gets real. Jack is still fighting the little blue creatures, and one of them starts to electrocute. One of the creatures starts to electrocute or something, and they just all die. Like, they all get electrocuted. And so Jack starts to freak out, and then he looks out the window, and it's the guy on the horse again that's just looking at him. And he says, it's too late now. You've done it already. You've become you've become this. And we're just sitting here like, what does that mean? And he's just like, come with me. And Jack says, okay. So Jack goes with this guy on the fucking horse that he's been afraid of this whole time, and that we have no idea who he is. And it's like, what's going to happen? So Aishi runs back in and sees all these people, but they're actually not dead. They're alive. They actually survived the shock. But I think that Jack thought that they were dead. I think it's still not entirely explained all too well. But anyway, she's like, Jack, we did it. We saved everybody. We won. We did this. But she's like, Jack. And then the episode literally ends with her yelling, "Hi, Jack!" Like, where are you? And that's literally where the episode ends. Wow, this was an incredible episode, honestly. Like, I honestly don't know what's gonna happen. Like, I'm literally on the edge of my seat at home, and I want to know what's gonna happen. I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next week. We do get a little sneak preview of next week's episode. Aishi is currently looking for Jack. She is on this little blimp looking thing, and there's these two elephant looking creatures in these robes, and they're like, we will not let you hurt Samurai Jack. And she's like, hurt him? I'm just trying to find him. But those little elephant creatures remind me of the ones from like the second or third episode from season 2. Or no, maybe it was season 1. Those little elephant guys. But she's like, oh, I hope Jack isn't hurt. And we do see one clip of Jack in the preview, but most of it is of Aishi. So I honestly have no idea where this episode is going to go. So it's really intriguing for me. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Comment down below what you guys thought of this week's episode. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What did you guys think of Aku's voice this week's episode? Like I said, it was a little rocky for me. He still sounds like he's trying to do a Mexican accent to me. Like, that doesn't sound historic old man Japanese. That sounds, I'm going to go mow the lawn Mexican. But anyways, guys, comment down below. Make sure you hit a like button. And make sure you subscribe for more, because I got these reviews coming out every week as soon as possible. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.